All right, this is Redwood Wonk on KZZH Radio 96.7 and also on Access Humboldt Television. The Chuck Rogers and I are going to talk about national politics. Of course, the big news of the week is the Republican National Convention. That's pretty much what's dominating the headlines at this point in time. We'll talk a little bit about the Democratic National Convention. Chuck and I were on a sister station last week, KMUD, discussing that a little bit more, and you could go to those archives for Thursday Night Talk, 7 o'clock, to find that. But we'll recap a little bit so we can do a little bit of compare and contrast. And we want to talk a little bit about the strength and weaknesses of each of the tickets as it stands. And it looks like all the theories about President Trump dumping the Pence for Nikki Haley doesn't seem like that's going to happen. There was a lot of speculation. Chuck, you had speculated on that early on, but that doesn't look like that's happening right now.
No, in fact, Nikki Haley was one of the speakers supporting the Trump-Pence ticket this week. I have to admit, I find the Republican convention a little hard to watch because they're using a different set of facts than what I'm accustomed to. So it seems like a parallel universe to me, but I'm trying to watch as much of it as I can. I noticed that it's a lot of Trump family members speaking.
Yes.
And, a few others who, are trying to position themselves for 2024, including Nikki Haley and Tim Scott and a few of the others as well. But, one of the things that really is disturbing to me is that, early on, I guess was it Monday, the platform committee of the Republican Party announced that they would not have
a platform.
They would not have a 2020 platform. And in fact, in the statement that they released from the platform committee, and this is important that it came from them, not only would there not be a platform for the Republican Party, but they just pledged to support Donald Trump. So what they've done is they've vacated principles and ideas and just pledged to heap adoration on one person. And in my mind, that means that it's no longer a political party. So I don't know what you think about that, but I know a lot of people don't spend time reading party platforms, but I think this is an important symbolic move away from what we normally think of as a political party with ideas.
Yeah. Now, again, the platform isn't binding. And so a lot of Republicans are going to say what some Democrats have said in the past. Doesn't really even matter what's in it. Something that gets debated and then set aside. Nobody bothers to read it after that, except maybe the opposing party uses it against you. But when you're taking on a campaign like that, I agree with you. Basically, you're simply you're no longer a party of ideas anyways. You're just a function of it. And you're right, it's the royal family. Every night there's like at least two Trump people. And probably one of the goofiest speeches I saw on Monday night was one given by Don Jr.'s girlfriend, Kimberly. I have a hard time saying her last name. What is it? Yeah. Who used to be, by the way, our own Governor Gavin Newsom's wife when he was mayor. I mean, that's how strange all this is. And of course, there was an affair involved, and she went to work on the East Coast for television, and then later was hired by Fox News. And I don't know if she's always been kind of conservative. She was raised in the Mission District of San Francisco, attended Mercy Catholic school. I actually was involved in high school with a girl who had been there, and it was kind of known, but not a conservative place. I don't know what her upbringing was like. There have always been conservatives in San Francisco, but she has gone in full bore. And that speech Monday night, there are people who are seriously speculating as to whether she and Don Jr. were on cocaine. They're talking about Don's eyes, and I don't want to get into the salacious stuff like that, but her speech was like North Korean, television, yelling, "Our venerable leader and the best is yet to come." She screams to the top of her lungs in an empty room. My wife, Jana, actually had to turn the TV down because she says this woman is yelling at me. She didn't know she was even. And it was crazy. It was just, so you had that. And then Monday night, especially last night was a little bit better. I don't know what's going on tonight. I think, the Vice President Pence and his wife are slated to speak. And, there are a few other people of interest. But except for a few speakers, it was dark and gloomy as last time around, right? And back then Trump gave.
Kimberly Guilfoyle was so overamped and shouting, and it was all fear and loathing, and the world's going to come to an end if Donald Trump is not reelected. And I'm glad you brought that particular speech up, because if you combine what she was saying, and it did sound like something from a North Korean state TV. If you combine the tone and the content of what she was saying with the lack of any ideas, this starts to look like just some fascist cult aimed at propping up the dear leader. That's really all it is. And it makes me think that they're not talking to the entire United States.
Yeah,
they're not
the
talking
base.
Registered voters. They're only talking to the people who already support them.
Yeah.
And, it looks as if it's not one country. They're only interested in the people who have already shown that they will support Donald Trump, and everybody else be damned. That's what it comes across as. And I think it's dangerous.
It is. And Matt Gaetz gave a really dark speech. I mean, it just was about what was going to happen with the Democrats. You're going to lose your guns. They're going to lock you in your house. Sorry, criminals, they're going to move criminals into your next door. There was a lot of talk about that, about bringing low-income people into the suburbs. And that's what the gun couple were talking about, the ones who waved their guns.
Right. Yeah. In fact, they said that suburbs would be abolished, which is about as absurd a thing as you could possibly say. But all of this seems to me to mean that the Republicans realize they cannot win if it's a referendum election on Donald Trump. Without a platform, they have no ideas to talk about and to propose. All that's left is fear and division. That's all they have left.
I agree at that. And the people who are at the who are in the speaking list, the only members of Congress you see pretty much are the ones who went to bat for Trump in the impeachment hearings. You've got Steve Jordan, Elise Stefanik, Lee Zelder, all of them. One person missing is Devin Nunes. And I'm a little curious about that, because he really did go to bat, but maybe they see him as a liability, because of his lawsuit against the fictitious cow and all. Anyway, but that's who's there. You've got the obligatory senators, a couple of senators, including the majority leader in the Senate, McConnell, and you had Scott. I think there's only one other. Oh, Joni Ernst. Joni Ernst is going to be speaking. I think those are the three senators. I don't know if there's any others on there. Of course, they want Joni Ernst to win because her campaign is maybe not the most vulnerable, but it's not safe either. That's a possible loss for them.
It's among the vulnerable seats. I'm surprised at the number of family members versus the number of high-profile Republican political folks. That's very curious to me. And the other thing is that if you listen closely to the Trump family members, I'm talking about the children. I guess we can talk about the First Lady's speech later. But if you listen to the children, they're not talking about Donald Trump as the human being, as the dad, as the head of their family. What a great guy he is. How wonderful it was growing up in his orbit. They didn't talk about any of that. They just talked about more dark fear mongering, and it makes you wonder why if they're going to put that many of his kids on the roster to speak, why didn't they talk about some of them talking about what a great guy he is?
What a great father he was.
Yeah, it seems to me that would be the reason to include a lot of the kids on the roster of speakers, wouldn't it?
I think it's just that they're the royal family. This is that family views the presidency as a family asset, and they're all there speaking for it. And every one of them, obviously, except for Mary, and obviously we're not going to see the Trump sister on there after those recordings, which we can also talk about later. But but no, it's that. It's the people that are loyal to him, a few obligatory dignitaries, but not many of them. And they certainly didn't give a format for some of the more vulnerable senators like Susan Collins or McSally in Arizona. It was really actually kind of strange and definitely not any kind of ideological diversity. Romney isn't there, for instance.
Right. Right.
And
go ahead.
Yeah, what I would say is the people that have impressed me are some of the quote unquote normal people, the non-politicians there. Last night, there was an officer who was from Arizona. He'd had a run-in with a homeless woman who was pregnant and on drugs. They had a really good conversation. He ended up adopting her child, helping get her it was a very heartwarming story, into recovery. They're good friends. And that was a warm story. And then he praised Trump for throwing money at the opiate problem, which is probably a good thing. I'm not sure, exactly if that was his decision or Congress's, but either way. And that was an impressive guy who, has political thoughts that are different from mine. I can accept that. And then there was another one who I think may be a rising star. And I know you didn't see him, but Daniel Cameron, who is the Attorney General of Kentucky, and he's won re-election this last time around. And I learned why. I mean, he's African American. And won a statewide election in Kentucky. He's very religious, I understand, but he gave a really effective speech. And I would say I would put it in the quality of Obama or Bill Clinton. I mean, it was that good of a speech. And it attacked Biden on his gaffes really effectively. His theme being, I have my own mind. You can't define me by the color of my skin, and attacking Biden for saying, if you're voting for Trump, you ain't really black, and talking about the black community as if it was monolithic, saying it's not as diverse as the Latino community. And he homed in on those points. And really hit hard, and then really came to suggest, I have my own mind, I have my own way of thinking, and then his praise for Trump was almost obligatory. I don't know how much he's really into Trump. He might be a classic conservative who had to be put on there because he is so brilliant a speaker. I've never seen him before. And I would say I'm worried about the future because I think he's attacking the left on some really key points. I do think that people in the progressive movements really need to start thinking about what's being referred to as cancel culture, or call out culture or whatever, because it's the opposition to it is going to come in hard, and from people of color who are saying, I don't think that way. And if you're really serious, white guilty liberal about your intention to hear people of color, then you are obliged to listen to me just as you're obliged to listen to Cornel West or anybody. I'm also African American. I have my experience. I've experienced racism, and I've got a different take than those people. So throw out the book White Fragility, which I think should be tossed anyway, but we'll talk about that another time. But but it's going to come in hard, and it's going to hit the left hard. Probably not this election. I don't think it's going to have any serious impact on this election, but it's really something that the left really needs to think about. Left needs to stop using terms like white working class or class reductionism to discuss, anybody that is discussing class issues and not incorporating, whatever they learned from critical race theory. Most of America has not attended a critical race theory class or a workshop. They don't understand why colonialism is used to describe anything modern. Not to say that that's illegitimate, but we don't explain. We have not been good at making this the case. And I think this guy is going to be at the forefront. We are not talking about crazy spectacle of Kanye or what's the name of the woman who is, I'm forgetting her name at the moment, but she's a conservative commentator who's African American and gets on the news all the time. Anyway, it's not her. And it's not the ivory tower of someone like Thomas Sowell. This is a person who is a brilliant communicator, and it would have been great, and may have been a really salient moment for the Republican Party and the conservative movement in general if it wasn't sandwiched between the crazy of Eric Trump and the total inappropriate speech of Pompeo right after. Those were big mistakes. Pompeo should not have even been there.
We paid for that. The taxpayers paid for his flight to Jerusalem and for his suite of rooms, I'm sure, at the King David Hotel, and for his time to make that speech. That's about as inappropriate as it gets. And I take your point, and it's important, and I think. On both sides of the divide in this country, on left and right, there are subsets of each group. And, with each election cycle, it's kind of which group of voices is going to come to the fore and lead the party for who knows how long a period of time. And what's going on the right now is that the fringe subset of the right that's always been there came to the fore with Donald Trump. And, we could trace it back further than that. But what we're dealing with right now is the fringe part of the right is now in control. Yes. And it's now the party of Donald Trump. There are times on the left when it seems like there are more progressive voices or more center left voices. And it happens in political parties a lot. And it has to do with the fact that we only have two parties. If we had more political parties that had access to our political system, some of these voices wouldn't be arguing within the same party. They would be arguing for number of seats in Congress. So that's where we are. I want to point out one other thing, and that was one of the speakers this week was Pam Bondi, who, former Attorney General, I guess, of Florida, was speaking about nepotism. And the danger of nepotism if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were elected, when on the bottom of the screen, the speakers who were going to follow her were all Trump family members. People who and let's not forget that Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, both Trump family members, are senior advisors in the White House.
Yes.
So the Republican Party is about as hypocritical as it gets, and. You mentioned religion. It has been heavy on religion during a week when one of the people most responsible for Donald Trump's rise in the Republican Party, Jerry Falwell Jr., has had to resign from his post at Liberty University, which his father founded, because of a scandal that's just absolutely hard to even believe. And we had Franklin Graham's daughter, who's the granddaughter of Billy Graham, kind of angrily talking at us about, the dangers of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And so, it seems to me that the whole arrangement of the Republican convention, and really, I think it's unimaginatively produced. They're just trotting one person out to the same podium every 5 minutes or so. And this is because They didn't even expect that they would not be able to have a 20,000 seat arena full during a pandemic. So they got caught with no plan B. And so now they just have a podium in a federal building, and they're trotting people out one after the other. And that's as imaginative as they get. So yeah. I think they are not swaying anyone, which gets me to another point I'd like your thoughts on. You and I have talked over the last several months, or since this race started last year, actually, that there was about 8 to 12, maybe even 15% of people who were undecided, considering themselves still in the middle. This week, on Monday, one of the latest polls that I saw that actually tried to figure out what the undecided is at this point has pegged it at somewhere between only 5 and 7%.
Yeah.
Biden is ahead by more than that. So if Trump got 100% of the undecideds, it still would not be enough. So that's where we are. And you can tell by this convention that they're not interested in trying to broaden their appeal. They're not inviting more people in. They're just talking to the people who already support Donald Trump.
Right. All right. Well, I'll talk about that in a minute. The woman I was trying to think of is Candace Owens. As spectacle as somebody, and what I'm saying is those aren't the token black people anymore. It's Daniel Cameron and Tim Scott, and I think it could be different. But the problem is it's one thing to have faces in there and even have them be brilliant speakers. It's another thing entirely to speak to the policies that are going to appeal to populations that are suffering from racism, from structural economic problems. You can only tell them that it's their fault for so many times before they don't listen to you, no matter what the color of your skin is. So we have that. And I wanted to also point out on the corruption part, I mean, watching it last night, I was listening to most of it on Monday night on the radio, so I didn't really get to see it as much. But last night, there was one Hatch Act violation over another, because he held a naturalization ritual there, which, by the way, most of that's been shut down due to the pandemic. But he had a bunch of people from different countries to show that he really doesn't just want Swedish immigrants to come in, and they did it right then and there, an official hearing to swear in as citizens with about 5 people there. Melania gave her speech in the Rose Garden with a group of what looked like about, I don't know, between 40 and 50 people, not social distancing and not wearing masks, again, aimed at the base.
Too.
Right. And everything, I mean, most of it was taking place in the White House. And let's remember that, about 5 or 6 years ago, Republicans freaked out when they heard rumors that Obama might have made a phone call to a fundraiser, a donor from the office. I mean, they flipped out about that, and here we've got him. I mean, this is the White House is basically a prop for their campaign. We're paying for it too, as you say. And so, yeah, that is corruption. I'm sorry, it's right there in front of us, but his base is going to say, well, he's a maverick. He doesn't follow rules. We like heroes that don't follow rules. We've been watching movies of heroes that don't follow rules all the time for years. There's always a cop show about somebody, where internal affairs are always the villains trying to stop him from getting the job done, right? I mean, this is what is appealing. His appeal is to it. If he follows the rules, they might even lose respect for him. But nobody's going to prosecute him for it or impeach him for it because, the Senate majority is just going to have his back no matter what. And so yeah, key corruption, key nepotism. And profiteering. They're profiteering. Their hotels are making money off of this whole thing. But people respect that.
The place where all the speakers are, the Mellon Auditorium, is near the Trump Hotel. So, you can imagine that most of those people are staying at the Trump Hotel and just funneling money into Donald Trump's pocket once again. So, yeah, I mean, it's the hypocrisy. They're not even trying to hide it. It's blatant. And you're right to describe it earlier. You said it's just a royal family, and that's all. That's how they see themselves. But they have so many people enabling them, and really a political party that no longer exists. So, and let's also not forget that Trump has not appointed replacement folks to the Federal Election Commission. So the FEC does not even have a quorum in order to meet anymore. So he gets away with whatever he wants to do. And it makes this election all the more important. I hope people are getting registered and taking this seriously, because it is serious.
It is very serious. And again, I think the strategy that we're talking about is he's pulled his money out of Michigan. My understanding is he's also not spending money in Pennsylvania. He's got money going into 6 key swing states that he spent last week and this week. Wisconsin is one of them. Georgia. I mean, the fact that he has to spend money in Georgia, but he's spending money in Georgia, Florida, Arizona, I think North Carolina, and I'm forgetting the other one. There's no offense. They're going on strict defense. They just want to get an inside straight, win Wisconsin. They were hoping before to try to get Minnesota, but they're not spending any money towards that. They're just focusing on their base and hoping that they can get the people that voted for Scott Walker to come out again for in Wisconsin, because that's the one they need to hold. They're not doing any offense in New Hampshire. They're certainly not doing any in Virginia. That's probably out of their reach anyway. They're spending in Ohio, where they shouldn't have to be spending. But if they can keep Wisconsin and everything else that they took, they can afford to lose Pennsylvania and Michigan. That's their, I don't know if we want to call it calculus or algebra, but that's what they're banking on, is holding on to that. They don't seem to be, at least at this point. Maybe it'll change if the polls move. But because you're right, we're down to the undecideds. I don't think that Biden has gotten a big boost. It's hard to tell because they're not doing tracking polls. I think there's only one tracking poll out there, and it's questionable. And so it's hard to know if he got a boost. Some polls have them higher. Some of them have a little bit lower than they were, but they're taken like a month apart, and so you don't know what factors into that. You can't. There's no guarantee that it's that it's due to due to the convention, but it may be that there really aren't many bounces. Rasmussen, of course, is a Republican polling outfit, and they always favor the Republican candidates, but they preserve their ratings in the last week of the race. They always magically all of a sudden move quickly towards conformity with all the other pollsters. They've got Biden with a 1-point lead. I think that's an outlier. Because other YouGov and others have him at 8 or 9 point leads. I think the average is still about 6 or 7, and it may not change. But I've been expecting it to get closer because there is a calculus, I guess you can call it, where Biden wins the popular vote by as much as 5% and still loses the Electoral College. Right. And that's what they're banking on. They're not trying to get the popular vote. They basically just want to get in there. And they'll just blame, if they lose the popular vote, they'll just say it was illegal immigrants or whatever, and voting, even though they've never caught one of them voting, and then just and try to win it out with that. And will it work? I don't know. But it seems like Biden has a good chance in Arizona. Seems like he's got a good chance in Wisconsin. He's heading all the polls, and a reasonable chance in Florida, and a reasonable chance in North Carolina. So if they hold Pennsylvania and Michigan, any one of those states falls, and Biden wins.
Yeah, I think a couple of things right there. I was hoping for more of a bounce for Biden and Harris after the Democratic convention as well, but When I started doing some research on it and some reading on it, what I discovered is that for the last 20 years or so, there hasn't been much of a bounce out of either convention. There's been some, just because of all the publicity that conventions draw, but there hasn't been the kind of bounce that people had seen much earlier in the convention era when decisions were actually being made at conventions. Now in our primary era, most of the decisions are made in the primary. And what you see if you look at the history of statistics is that there's a little bit of a bounce after a convention, but not what most of us would like to see. And especially when you consider that the undecideds are down maybe as low as 5 to 7%, that's not that many people you're going to add to your numbers anyway. So, and the other thing to keep in mind about this is that the Trump party has, and that's what I'm going to start calling it since the Republicans no longer have ideas to publish. The Trump party has announced that the president on election day, for people who want to vote in person, they're going to be met in some places at polling places by armed law enforcement. I don't know if you read that or not, but
I thought they backed off of that. I thought they backed off that, but who knows?
I don't know. He's said several times this week that he's going to order armed law enforcement to polling places. Which again, that's consistent with not a political party, but just a cult of personality and just making sure to protect that one person, not the party. So,
and what are they going to do at the polling stations? I mean, it's not like they can see if somebody's doing fraud. So it would have to be discovered by a poll worker.
I think it's designed to intimidate. I think it's designed especially to intimidate people of color who may not want to go stand in line for 3 hours with, an armed law enforcement officer staring at them with body armor on and, a menacing looking weapon pointed at them.
Well, if they do go forward with that, I'm sure there will be lawsuits on that. He hasn't been winning all of his lawsuits lately.
That's actually, I think, their point. How long would those lawsuits take? Could take years, right?
Oh no, they could get an injunction pretty quickly if they go there. If that's an actual executive order to have federal marshals standing in polls, and especially if they're focused in minority neighborhoods, they could get a preliminary injunction right then and there, and you don't have to resolve the whole lawsuit.
Are the judges that Trump has appointed, especially the ones who have been deemed unqualified by the American Bar Association, going to make the right decision on that?
Well, I'll tell you, it was a Trump-appointed judge last week who told him, I need to see some evidence that voting by mail is going to increase fraud, and they weren't able to produce it. It looks like that Trump-appointed judge is going to toss it out. So depends on which judge. It may be that, some of them early on came at the recommendation of Republicans. They don't always get it right. Remember, Souter was Sununu's child, then he went in there and became one of the most progressive judges that has ever been on the Supreme Court. So
I know you have more faith than I do right now. I'm much more concerned about the mechanics of this election, and I can just imagine some of the campaign staff meetings, the kind that over the years I've been in, just doing what Donald Trump wants them to do. So I don't have as much faith in the judiciary right now. I hope that you're right and I'm wrong.
I hope so too. I think that there's going to be massive organization around this. I'm sure where there is any armed official at any polling place, there will be a large group of people there to monitor them. I'm sure there's a lot of organization going on around this. Organization to get people to the polls to do absentees, ahead of time instead of putting it in the mail. I mean, there are a number of organizations that are massively working on this. It could actually, in theory, increase the vote because of this. I mean, it's
Let's hope. Let's hope. And you're right. There are a lot of people all over the country talking about mobilizing and getting those ballots to drop-off points where, usually they're like at a county courthouse somewhere, but doing those kinds of things, and that's great. I hope that there are enough of those organizations, though, because this is a big country. Yeah. And what if they go to some of those drop-off points and they encounter right-wing militia members who have guns? What happens then?
Yeah, well, it also bothers me that I just learned that there are a few counties and municipalities around the country that have rules in which they state under no circumstances can the paper ballots be counted, even where they produce them. That under no circumstances, no recount or anything like that. Why? I mean, that just makes me really suspicious right there. Anyway, it's but they can be obtained by through sunshine laws and the Freedom of Information Act if it's a federal type thing, and the media will count them. And so.
Well, remember, it was the media, the New York Times, that counted the Florida votes in 2000 and discovered that Gore actually won, but the Supreme Court installed George W. Bush instead. So
yes, agreed. But Roberts wasn't on that court, so we'll see. Roberts is a wild card. We don't know where he's going to fall.
Yes, he is.
So anyway, if there's anything else you want to say about the RNC, it's really. They're trying to copy the Democratic one in a lot of ways. They've got a couple of Democrats who are endorsing, including that congressman from Georgia, and there's one from New Jersey that are that are two Democrats endorsing Trump. They don't have the list of of Republicans that did. Sassy, I guess, just joined the Biden backing Trump this Monday, and I don't see a lot of quote unquote normal Republicans at the RNC. It's either, as you say, his family or people that are loyalists to him, except for, McConnell's pretty loyal. So yeah, I would include him in that camp too, but there's nobody outside of that clique.
Well, one thing that is a little confounding to me is trying to figure out Nikki Haley's strategy. Mm-hmm. If she were not going to be on the ticket, she would have known that, long before the convention for sure. And if she's trying to position herself for 2024, does she really want all of these sound bites that she's handing to the Democrats supporting Donald Trump in the event that Donald Trump loses, and then in the event that Donald Trump and his family members are tried and convicted of crimes? I don't really understand why, if she's not going to be on the ticket and she's aiming for 24, that she really wants to hitch her wagon to the Trump party right now. And also, one other thing that I think is a little odd about her speech there, Nikki Haley, and she deserves a lot of credit for this, following the awful shooting at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, she directed the move to get the Confederate flag down from the flagpole on the Capitol grounds in Columbia, South Carolina. And again, she deserves a lot of credit for that. That was absolutely the right thing to do, long overdue, but it was the right thing to do. Yet now she is talking in support of a person, Donald Trump, who wants Confederate symbols and statues to remain. So how does she reconcile that? And how does a voter who's trying to figure out exactly what she stands for reconcile that?
Okay. Chuck, so any other comments about the RNC before we move on?
No, I think we've buried it well.
Yeah, I mean, I watch it every time. I'm a geek. But it's kind of hard for me to watch. Normally, okay, I find some things that are annoying, and especially when I see somebody that scares me a little bit because, like in '92, George Bush had a few zingers that I thought were going to draw blood against Clinton, for instance, and I'm not seeing that this time. I think this is just red meat for the base, and that's it.
I think that's exactly it, and the darkness of it all and the politics of fear I wonder whether not just the Democratic Party, not just the Biden-Harris campaign, but I wonder if groups like the Lincoln Project, and there are several other of the Never Trump groups out there, are going to focus in on the negativity that's coming from the Trump party during this convention, and incorporate that in some of the ads that they're running, most of which are excellent and make very good points. I hope that they do focus on this tone, because it's really disturbing. And I hear that from a lot of people that I've talked to about this. And but the fear of the politics of fear, the politics of fear is still with us, because it has a track record of working. So
yeah, but usually it works when you're out of power and you want to get in power. When you've been holding power for 4 years and had total power of all three branches of government for 3.5, and you still have 2.5 branches of government, then who's responsible for it?
Well, exactly. And recall that some of the speakers, including Trump himself, that a lot of the speakers, including Trump, have been saying that if Biden is elected, you'll see, look at all the unrest in the streets and buildings burning. That's going to be what you're going to be facing in a Biden administration, when in fact that's what's going on Donald Trump's watch. So I don't get how he can use what's going on now on his watch as a way of scaring people about somebody else. Seems to me that the chaos that's going on now should be a problem for him.
You would think, but that's that's not what he's presenting. I guess it's the deep state not letting the vaccine get made, not letting anything happen, and it's like, then shouldn't that reflect on his effectiveness against the deep state? I don't know. It's hard to comprehend for me, but it is definitely where they're going, because that's what he knows. Now we're going to take a look at the clip from the very first debate, in which there is a confrontation between Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, and it's amazing that they're on the ticket, but maybe not quite so amazing. Let's watch it.
So on the issue of race, I couldn't agree more that this is an issue that is still not being talked about truthfully and honestly. There is not a black man I know, be he a relative, a friend, or a coworker, who has not been the subject of some form of profiling or discrimination. Growing up, my sister and I had to deal with the neighbor who told us her parents couldn't play with us because we were black. And I will say also that in this campaign, we've also heard, and I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden, I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of 2 United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me. So I will tell you that on this subject, it cannot be an intellectual debate among Democrats. We have to take it seriously. We have to act swiftly.
Look. Everything I've done in my career, I ran because of civil rights. I continue to think we have to make fundamental changes in civil rights. And those civil rights, by the way, include not just only African Americans, but the LGBT community.
But Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No,
do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
Well,
I
there
did
was
not
a
oppose.
failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 decades after Brown v. Board of Education.
Because your city council made that decision. It was a
So
local
that's
decision.
where the federal government must step in. That's why we have the
government
Voting
must
Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why
30 seconds, because I want to bring other people into this.
I supported the ERA from the very beginning. I'm the guy that extended the Voting Rights Act for 25 years. We got to the place where we got 98 out of 98 votes in the United States Senate doing it. I've also argued very strongly that we, in fact, deal with the notion of denying people access to the ballot box. I agree that everybody, once they, in fact, they should. Anyway, my time's up. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Vice President.
So after watching that, and you see that that Joe Biden was actually quite rattled in that exchange. He actually timed out. He actually says, "Oh, I'm out of time." Normally, they don't do that. Normally, they go over their time until the timekeeper or the moderator pretty much has to really interrupt to get him to stop. But he wanted to get out of that subject and away from Kamala, who was just really being tough on him. And yet here they are, true team of rivals. And by all indications, it looks like he respects her for what she did. Whereas, Donald Trump was kind of amazed by it in his tweet, said, but she was rude to him at the debates. How could he be doing this? There's a totally different concept of leadership and of putting together a team. What do you say?
Well, I think that, sometimes you find on a team folks who were once rivals who have come together to win a championship. And maybe that's what's going on here. Maybe Joe Biden saw in that moment in Kamala Harris a lot of strength and somebody who was on the national stage and doing well on the national stage and saying what she thought and making her point, regardless of the fact that he was a former vice president and the leading candidate for the nomination for president. I think my own opinion is that I think that exchange did her a lot of good. It could be that she was already one of his top picks. We don't know. We always heard Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren and maybe Susan Rice and a few others. But maybe in that moment, he saw what he knew from experience is important on the national stage. And that's not that the national stage is too big for you. It's that you belong on the national stage. And that's what Kamala Harris, I think, proved to him in that moment. And she prosecuted the case. And look, he got into this race knowing that he had a long record. And in politics, for as long as he's been in politics, he should have known he was going to have to answer to a lot of the decisions he made a long time ago. That's the disadvantage of having a long record in politics when you're still running for office.
Right. Now, I wouldn't agree that in that particular moment he was thinking, oh, I want her to be my vice president. But maybe after he woke up the next morning and reflected on the fact that, basically she made Kavanaugh cry at the hearings, the way she treated him there. She flustered Barr. She's really good at that. And I think he woke up and said, you know what? I want to see how Pence holds up under that. So, I think he wants somebody tough, but it also indicates that maybe he wants somebody who's going to challenge him. I don't know, somebody who's going to say something and not be a sycophant.
And let's recall that he said multiple times that one of the reasons he and President Obama worked well together was that Joe Biden was always the last person in the room when tough decisions were being made. And, people have written for years and years and years about the fact that one of the biggest qualities, most important qualities of a vice president is somebody who not only knows the issues, but who can tell the president what the president may not want to hear, but what the president needs to hear in order to make a good decision. Clearly, Kamala Harris is that kind of person. So, maybe Joe Biden is thinking about the practicalities of governing. And Kamala Harris is somebody who can step into the Oval Office and tell President Biden exactly what he needs to hear. So, maybe that was part of his calculation selecting her.
Maybe. I mean, that's certainly the non-cynical view, of it, is that he actually is thinking about how he wants to govern and wants people that are going to challenge him, and he'll be the ultimate decision maker, but he wants to hear from different points of view. I mean, it's there's rumors that he's thinking about Bernie Sanders for Secretary of Labor. There's rumors, that he's going to have somebody totally, so maybe Susan Rice as Secretary of State. I mean, those are very different people, and that's what Lincoln talked about, a team of rivals, right?
Exactly. And Elizabeth Warren as Secretary of the Treasury, he's talking about.
Maybe, but they do have to worry about the Senate there. It'll probably depend on if they got a big Senate lead.
Yes, exactly. And but you're right. And I think that your reference to Lincoln and the team of rivals that he was talking about is apropos, and maybe that's where this is headed.
So anyway, I mean, at least that's what I want to think, right? I mean, that here's a leader who has a little bit of humility but wants the best team in there, and not somebody who's just going to kiss up to him. I mean, it's because all of the grown-ups, I'm sorry, are out of the Trump administration right now. The closest one who came to it, are Sessions. And he's out, and I mean, there's nobody in there anymore who, is somebody that you can really think is, somebody who's going to challenge him. And
General Mattis is gone. Don McGahn is gone. John Kelly is gone. It's a long, long list. I believe, I hope I'm right about this, but I recall reading that there's been more turnover in this White House than any in recent memory. And that's, I think, typical of somebody who just surrounds himself with chaos like Donald Trump always has. I mean, his organization is like that. His family is like that. I mean, that Donald Trump exists within chaos. And so I think it's not unusual that we see chaos in the Oval Office and in the country. I mean, that's who's at the top. That's who's leading us right now.
All right, we're at our predictions. How do you have any predictions for the near future or for the far future?
Yeah, I have a couple of predictions. I am predicting, just based on what I've heard this week and what I heard last week, at all the conventions, I am predicting that this election is headed to the Supreme Court. I think that yes, there's going to be a lot of mail-in voting, and yes, that means we're not going to get an answer on the night of November 3rd. I understand that, but I have a feeling that no matter what happens, there's so much distrust on each side that there will be a challenge, no matter the official result or what we're told is the official result. So I think we need to be taking a look at John Roberts and figuring out what he would do in this case, because I think this election is going to end up in the Supreme Court. Another prediction is that even if Donald Trump is defeated, I don't think Trumpism is going away. I think what we've seen this week at the Republican National Convention suggests to us that Trumpism is going to stick around no matter what happens. I wouldn't even be surprised if Trump does lose and if he is somehow removed from the White House, which is another issue. But if he is, he might run again in 2024 because he would be able to, having not served terms. So Supreme Court is where the election's headed. Trumpism is with us for who knows how much longer, but it's not going away. Donald Trump may not be going away.
Well, unless it's a landslide. Which it could happen. It's not impossible, especially with the strategy they're choosing. But we'll see. And it might be that he doesn't run again, but Don Jr. runs, or Ivanka or somebody.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, my prediction is I think Trump is going to realize he can't move the numbers unless he's got those rallies, or at least he's going to think that. And I think he's going to attempt the rallies again. Whether they'll be involved social distancing or whether he'll just say, hell with it, sorry, Herman Cain, but we're going to do this. We gotta win it. And then the question is how does Biden respond? Biden, I have to say, has acted really coolly so far. that when they've talked about, well, Biden just isn't entertaining. And one of the commentators on the PBS NewsHour the other night said, well, maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe we don't need a president who's entertaining. So,
well, yeah, look where we are with a reality TV star. So, yeah, I think the country actually wants somebody who is stable and who is a person of common sense and who is interested in actually governing and getting things done in this country. So, yeah, I agree with you. I agree with your prediction. I also agree that that's probably a good thing for Joe Biden.
The other thing I want to say is the ratings for the Republican Party this week have been Monday were a bit lower than the Democrats on Monday. Last night was just a little bit lower, but I think part of the factor there is Michelle Obama was a big draw on Monday of the Democrats, and a lot of people wanted to see Melania. See her talk, see if she would be upbeat. She went after the media, but other than that, wasn't very negative. And I'm thinking that that if Trump on Thursday does not get ratings that are bigger than Biden, he's going to have a meltdown and say it's fake news.
Well, absolutely. He will find some way to blame somebody or some organization for that, because remember, he does not take responsibility at all for anything.
Okay. Until next time, you've been listening to Redwood Wonk on KZZH and Access Humboldt. And thank you, Matt, for doing a great job of engineering. And thank everybody out there for watching us. And we always love input. Send us letters about what you want to hear about.